and helps the county with the operation, the maintenance, and a lot of things around here. And this is our Community Nature Education Series, which we do on the third Sunday of every month. And we have a really special program for you today about the Oak of the Golden Dream, and we'll introduce our speaker in a couple of minutes. But as I said, every Sunday we have something, usually nature or local history related. Next month we have a really good program. I think it's Poisonous Plants of Placerita Canyon. And I'm sure you're all interested in that, okay? Because there's a few plants out there that we caution our visitors to be aware of. Well, anybody want to guess what the number one plant is we caution visitors to be aware of? Poison oak, yes. Poison oak. I'm very familiar with poison oak. Plenty of experience. I've got pictures to show you. I know TMI. But anyway, that should be an interesting program. So, any other questions before I get started? Placerita Canyon Nature Center. I hope you've had an opportunity to visit our new museum, our new classroom displays here with taxidermy. This has been totally refurbished in the last year, so we're very proud of this stuff. So anyway, now I'd like to get started with our program. We have Dr. Alan Pollock from the Santa Clarita Historical Society. And you've all read the flyers and stuff like that. You've been anxiously awaiting this. It's called Dissecting the Dream, about the Oak of the Golden Dream. So, Alan, you're on.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm president of the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society. And as a historian, kind of like the Dragnet TV show or whatever, we kind of like to get the facts. The story of the Oak of the Golden Dream, we've debated over the years how much of it was fact and how much might have been made up or fiction or whatever. And just for the Placerita Canyon people, we're probably not going to destroy the dream today, but we're just going to go over what facts we do have. Kind of make it a little clearer as to what actually happened or where the source of the story came from. So let's get started. So the Oak of the Golden Dream, which is located right here in Placerita Canyon, is one of the Santa Clarita Valley's most revered historical sites. It is presumably the site of Francisco Lopez's gold discovery in 1842. So today we're going to examine how the gold story came to be, and we may discover whether it is truly fact or fiction. So first, we're going to go over the story that we all know and love. So we're going to take you back to March 9th, 1842. And we have 40-year-old Francisco Lopez with his companions Manuel Cota and Domingo Bermudez. They wander into Placerita Canyon in search of some stray cattle. Lopez gets tired. He falls asleep under an old oak tree, and he dreams of finding gold. When he awakens, he remembers his wife's request for some wild onions to be brought home. And he then goes under a nearby sycamore tree, and where he finds a patch of onions. He digs up the onions with his knife and found clinging to their roots some flecks of gold. Lopez then sends a letter to California Governor Juan B. Alvarado, notifying him of the gold discovery and seeking permission to mine the gold. This therefore represents the first documented gold discovery in California history. This is a full 6 years prior to the more famous discovery of gold by John Marshall in John Sutter's mill race on the South Fork of the American River. And the oak tree under which Lopez presumably fell asleep is now what we refer to as the Oak of the Golden Dream. But is this what really happened? Well, it turns out that John Sutter and James Marshall knew about the Lopez discovery. They actually learned about it in 1845. Sutter was involved in an insurrection by former Governor Juan Alvarado against his successor, who was an immensely unpopular man by the name of Manuel Micheltorena. Sutter chose the wrong side in the battle. He chose the side with Micheltorena, and after a bloodless one-day battle, Alvarado prevailed and Micheltorena was driven back to Old Mexico. Alvarado then threw Sutter and his right-hand man John Bidwell into prison near the San Fernando Mission. And when they were released shortly thereafter, Bidwell headed north up here to Placerita Canyon, and he observed the gold mining operations, and he told Sutter about it. Bidwell then went back up to Sutter's fort and he wanted to find gold up there himself. There he met a new arrival by the name of John Marshall, and he told John Marshall about it. Well, it turns out that although we call Francisco Lopez's discovery of gold the first gold discovery in California, it is actually the first documented gold discovery in California. And gold had presumably been found in California and in the Santa Clarita Valley, but not documented far prior even to the Lopez discovery. And in this pamphlet, California Gold, by Guy J. Giffen, he reviewed some of the earlier mentions of gold in California history. For instance, a cleric accompanying Sir Francis Drake on his famous circumnavigation of the globe made note of a golden treasure to be found among the rocks on the California coast when Drake's expedition landed in California in 1579. Then there was Sebastian Vizcaíno. He sailed up the coast of Alta California, which is now Southern California, in November 1602. He was on a mission to find safe harbors for Spanish Manila galleons on their journey from Manila to Acapulco, and to map in detail the California coastline. He reported to the Spanish king about possibilities of gold in California. There were Russian explorers who came down from Alaska, and they were said to be aware of gold in California in 1814. And mountain man Jedediah Smith, he was thought to have found gold near Mono Lake in 1825 and took the gold with him to the Green River camp of the American Fur Company. This name I'm going to butcher, but I'll do my best. Eugène Duflat de Maufras, a French naturalist, botanist, diplomat, and explorer, was sent to explore the Pacific coast of North America in the years 1840 to 1842. He was on a mission to access the Mexican Alta California and American Oregon Territory for French business interests. And in his records, he mentions the discovery of gold at San Isidro in what is now San Diego County in 1828. Well, it turns out, oddly, there was actually a shipment of gold from California which took place prior to the Lopez discovery. Giffen, in his pamphlet, mentions a document from the Philadelphia Mint that shows the first shipment of California gold to the Mint by the firm of Hussey and McKay in 1838. Just how this firm came into possession of the gold, we don't know. The gold may have been sent to a New York broker, George McKay, by his brother Thomas, who was a fur trapper for the Hudson Bay Company in Northern California. But how Thomas may have gotten the gold, we don't know. In the Santa Clarita Valley, there is the legend of the Lost Padres Mine, a story of a cache of gold that may have been buried by the Padres of the San Fernando Mission in the 1790s. We also have reports of mining in San Francisco Canyon in the 1820s and 1830s. Now let's look at the history of the Lopez family. We have a couple of Lopez descendants here today. Your name?
Andrea.
And Lynn Adams back there. So if I have anything wrong here, they're going to correct me. Your name?
Merritt.
Merritt, okay. So we got lots, so I can't get this wrong because they're gonna do it. Okay. So Jose Jesus, and this is a very, to me anyway, a very convoluted family history with a lot of similar names. So bear with me. We have Jose Jesus Lopez. He's a grandnephew of our gold discoverer Francisco Lopez. Discussed the genealogy of his family with author Frank F. Latta in 1916. Here's a genealogy chart of the Lopez family. And the gold discoverer Francisco is right here. And we'll go over this chart in more detail. So according to Jose Jesus, ancestors of the Lopez family came from the Asturias province in Spain, and he claims that the family was wealthy and belonged to the aristocracy of Castile. However, Lynn Adams, who's back there, who's a descendant of Jose Ignacio Maria de Jesus Lopez, has done some extensive genealogical research on the Lopez family, and she came to a different conclusion, and correct me if I'm wrong. According to Lynn, the patriarch of the Lopez family in New Spain was Andres Lopez, born around 1695 in the Sinaloa province. And the grandfather of Andres Lopez may have been a Juan Lopez, who was a conquistador under Hernan Cortez. Now, in that family chart, just in detail, we have Jose Ignacio Maria de Jesus Lopez. You're descended from that, right? Yeah. And his wife, Maria Facunda de Mora, brought the Lopez family to Alta California in 1771. Jose oversaw construction of the San Gabriel mission. They had a son, Juan Batista Lopez, who was appointed mayordomo or foreman of the San Fernando mission when it was built in 1797. Juan Batista Lopez and his wife Maria Dolores Salgado de Lopez had a number of children, one of whom was Pedro Lopez, who became mayordomo of the San Fernando mission after the missions were secularized in 1834. And his brother, Francisco Lopez, was our gold discoverer. Pedro had a daughter, Catalina Lopez, who married her second cousin, Geronimo Lopez. They did that in those days. In 1861, Catalina and Geronimo built and ran a stagecoach stop called Lopez Station. The site of Lopez Station is now the Van Norman Reservoir in Sylmar. They also built the Lopez Adobe in 1882, which you can still visit today in the city of San Fernando. So here again, we come back to our genealogy chart. We have Ignacio married Maria. They begat Juan Batista, who married Maria Salgado. They begat Pedro Lopez and our gold discoverer, Francisco. Pedro had the daughter Catalina, who married her cousin, Geronimo. Right? Okay. Okay. Before we go on, Lynn, anything that you would like to add to this? Anything that you would like to add to the family? All right. Okay, now, Francisco Lopez has sometimes been characterized as sort of a hick cowboy that knew nothing and just happened to stumble onto gold in Placerita Canyon. But it turns out Lopez was a well-educated man, and particularly in mineralogy, he knew what he was looking for. He studied French in college in Mexico City, and he learned mineralogy at the Colegio de Minería in Mexico City. And he ended up in the Santa Clarita Valley on the Rancho San Francisco. Does everybody know what the Rancho San Francisco is? Okay, so that's our valley, basically. That was the Spanish land grant here, where his niece, Maria Jacoba Feliz, had married an ex-Spanish soldier, Antonio del Valle. The rancho had been granted to the del Valles in 1839 by Governor Juan Alvarado. Now, a little interesting fact I ran across here, that we generally say, us historians say that Antonio del Valle had asked for the land grant from the governor. And I read, and I forget what my source was, but apparently actually Maria Jacoba Feliz might have been the one that sent the request and not her husband, which is a new fact I didn't know. On the rancho, Lopez initially spent his time looking for gold, and this is before he discovered it. And he liked to hunt for bears and mountain lions. Eventually, the Del Valles rented a portion of the rancho to Lopez, which he used for grazing cattle. Francisco went on to become a landowner in his own right. He was granted the Rancho Tujunga, which you see here. Along with his brother Pedro in 1840. That area is now Sunland, Tujunga, and Lakeview Terrace. They did a trade, kind of like a baseball trade, I guess, of Tujunga for the Rancho Cahuenga in 1845. In 1843, Francisco was granted the Rancho Temescal. That area is now Piru, Lake Piru, and Hasley Canyon. And on the Rancho Temescal, Lopez found gold in San Feliciana Canyon. Now, there are some of the sources have thought that that Feliciana Canyon may have been the site of the gold discovery that we say is here. Others have said that, that it was a second gold discovery that Francisco Lopez made sometime in the same year or year after Placerita Canyon, and that's likely the most probable story. And some that have called both canyons the same canyon, which is not true. It's not here. Francisco Lopez's last land grant was the Rancho Los Alamos y Agua Caliente, and that area is now part of the Tejon Ranch in Kern County. So, on October 1st, 1842, the Lopez gold discovery was reported in the New York Observer newspaper. And although this gold strike was obviously reported nationally, it never came close to the fame and the onset of mass human migration that was associated with the gold discovery at Sutter's Mill 6 years later. Now, for most of the remainder of this talk, we're going to explore the various sources of the Lopez gold discovery story and the Oka the Golden Dream story. And here you see listed the various sources that we're going to look at. First, we have Abel Stearns. He gave testimony in 1867 regarding the gold discovery. Abel Stearns was a Los Angeles merchant who emigrated to Monterey in 1829. He settled in Los Angeles where he built a warehouse at San Pedro. He then started a stagecoach route from San Pedro to the Los Angeles Pueblo, and 2 years later built a flour mill in Los Angeles. Because of these enterprises, he became one of the most prominent and influential people in Los Angeles. Stearns' account of the Lopez gold discovery is to be found in a letter he wrote to Louis Lull, who at the time was the secretary of the Society of Pioneers in San Francisco. In that letter, Stearns relates the story as told to him personally by Francisco Lopez. You'll see in this talk we're going to go through several versions of the Lopez story, so this is the second one we're going to hear. According to Stearns, Lopez was out one day searching for stray horses. He stops under some trees to rest and get some shade, and subsequently digs up some wild onions with his knife and sees a piece of gold in the dirt. Looking around further, he finds some more gold. He took the gold into town, showed it around to his friends, and this set up a minor gold rush of local citizens who rushed to the discovery site and searched for the gold on their own. From there until late in 1846, the gold placers were worked primarily by migrants from Sonora, Mexico. And remember, this is according to Abel Stearns. Of note, there was no mention of a golden dream or golden oak in the Stearns account. Stearns later in 1842 sent samples of the Placerita gold to his friend Alfred Robinson and asked that they be taken to be assayed at the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia. Almost a year later, Robinson writes back to Stearns with the results of the gold assay, which you can see here. This is a copy of an 1843 voucher from the U.S. Mint, which details the assay of Stearns' gold samples. Our next source, John Murray, Overland Monthly, 1892. He presented evidence to date the Lopez gold discovery to June 1841 rather than March 1842. One of his sources was a pamphlet entitled An Historical Sketch of Los Angeles County, published in 1876 by Los Angeles businessman John J. Warner and two co-authors. Now, this is the strangest version of the Lopez story you're going to hear. I've never heard this one, and it's a weird one. So Murray, he had a very different take on the gold story. According to Murray's story on the gold discovery, he relates that a Mexican mineralogist, Don Andres Castillero, traveled from Los Angeles to Monterey in late 1840 or early 1841. Castillero found some small pebbles known to Mexican miners as tepustete, a variety of pyrites, while passing through the Las Virgenes Rancho. Castilleros brought the pebbles to Santa Barbara to show while a house guest at the home of Don Jose Antonio de la Guerra y Noriega, that's a long name, and stated that they were a good indication of gold fields in the vicinity. Mr. Francisco Lopez just happened to be at that house that day, and he saw Castillero's pebbles. A short time later, Lopez came upon a similar pebble, scooped up some dirt, and found a grain of gold. The news of his discovery spread quickly from Santa Barbara to Los Angeles, and soon hundreds of people came to the site of the Lopez discovery to look for gold. Anybody ever heard this one? Murray then presents evidence to question Abel Stern's account dating the gold discovery to 1842. He quotes a letter written to him by John J. Warner in 1891. And in that letter, Warner relates returning to Los Angeles from a trip to New England on July 4th, 1841, and states that shortly thereafter, in the summer of 1841, he accompanied some men to the gold fields on Antonio del Valle's Rancho San Francisco. Murray also points out that author and historian Hubert Howe Bancroft had stated that the gold was discovered during Del Valle's lifetime. Del Valle is known to have died in 1841. Murray also questioned Stern's memory of the gold discovery after a lapse of 25 years, stating that he may have confused the date of his purchasing of the gold with the date of the gold discovery. Murray felt that the purchase date may have been at least a year after the discovery date, therefore placing the discovery in 1841 rather than 1842. So Murray concluded, and I quote, "Thus the date of the discovery is established as being 1841. Remember, that's his opinion. Next, we look at an article written by J.M. Gwynn in the San Francisco Call newspaper of September 8, 1895. Gwynn, who at the time was secretary of the Southern California Historical Society, summarized the controversy over the date of the gold discovery. So we had John J. Warner gave the date as June 1841. He attributed the information to Antonio del Valle's son, Ignacio del Valle. We have Abel Stearns gave the date of March 1842. We had another source, Bandini, gave a date of April 1842. And then there was Antonio F. Coronel, who had spent some time in the mines, and he was positive that the year was 1842. Now, the historian Bancroft actually gave two contradictory dates. In his text of California history, he used the Stearns date of March 1842, but in his Pioneer Register, he dates the discovery to the same year as the death of Antonio del Valle in 1841. Then there was William Heath Davis, who in his book, 60 Years in California, gives the date as 1840 and attributes the discovery to a group of Sonorans traveling to Monterey. He totally kicked out Francisco Lopez as the discoverer. Gwynn therefore concluded, from this mass of contradictory data, it is impossible to evolve the correct one, nor is it probable that the exact date will ever be known. The strongest evidence seems to incline toward March 1842. Gwynn, in his article, further compared the two California discoverers, Lopez and Marshall. And he said about Lopez, the real discoverer of gold in California lived in obscurity, died in poverty, and sleeps his last sleep in a nameless grave. And frankly, I tend to believe that because we have had some good researchers looking into the life of Francisco Lopez. We have yet to find an obituary on the guy or even a death date on him. So he may well have been very obscure. If you look on our website on scvhistory.com, there is a obituary of Francisco Lopez. That ain't the right Francisco Lopez. That's another family member of his that we mixed up. So we really don't know. Gwynn further talked about Marshall. He called him the reputed first discoverer who obtained celebrity worldwide. In his latter years, drew a pension of $3,000 a year from the state. And after his death, the grateful Republic erected a statue of bronze to his memory. I've read in other sources that Marshall died penniless, so I don't think either man really benefited much from their gold discoveries, quite frankly. But this is interesting. Gwynn further concludes Very little merit attaches to the discovery in either case. In both cases, it was purely accidental, but whatever does belongs to Lopez, not Marshall. Score one for us. In response to Gwyn's article, 82-year-old pioneer Isaac L. Given wrote a letter to Gwyn disputing the 1842 discovery date. Given claimed to have been in a party of emigrants who came to Los Angeles from Santa Fe in the fall of 1841. And if anybody is familiar with the Workman Temple's homestead down in, where's it, El Segundo or something like that, that was the workman party that came out that this person was a part of. He further stated that shortly after arriving in Los Angeles, he dined with Abel Stearns and was shown gold dust obtained on the Rancho San Francisco. Then there was a 115-year-old Sonoran man, Francisco Garcia. To live 115 years in that time, that guy had good genes, I think. He claimed to have been with Lopez at the gold discovery in 1838. Are you confused yet? No. And he claimed that the gold discovery was in San Feliciana Canyon and not Placerita Canyon. Well, Charles Prudhomme, in a 1922 article, stated that Lopez actually did show Garcia the discovery sites at both Placerita and San Feliciana in 1843, and that Garcia went back to Mexico and returned with some miners to work those two areas. So he did actually see those areas. Prudhomme was a historian for the, I love this name, Ramona Parlor 109, Native Sons of the Golden West. His article on the gold discovery appeared in the annual publication of the Historical Society of Southern California in 1922, and his goal was to show that Francisco Lopez, not John Marshall, was the first discoverer of gold in California. Score two for us. He placed the Lopez gold discovery in Placerita Canyon in 1842 and stated a second discovery in San Feliciana Canyon in the same year. Prudhomme's first piece of evidence came from Cyrus Lyon, who came to Los Angeles with his brother Sanford Lyon from Maine in 1849. The brothers are most famous here in the Santa Clarita Valley for setting up a stagecoach stop at called Lyon Station, which we believe was in the vicinity of what is now the Eternal Valley Cemetery. And as you may know, Lyons Avenue is named for that stagecoach stop and for them. In Mr. Lyon's daily notes, he states, "I was so informed that in 1842, 45 miles northwest from the Pueblo, were discovered the Placerita placer by Francisco Lopez. And the same year, he discovered the San Feliciana placer mine." Prudhomme's second piece of evidence came from Francisca Lopez de Beldarrain, who was a great-grandniece of Francisco Lopez. At a 1914 Lopez family reunion, which was presumably at the site of the gold discovery here in Placerita Canyon, Francisca Lopez de Beldarrain heard Catalina Lopez, the niece of Francisco Lopez, and the lady that married her second cousin, recounted her personal memory as an 11-year-old child of the first anniversary celebration of the gold discovery, which was held in 1843, also presumably at the gold discovery site. So Prudhomme rode out with Beldarrain and another Lopez relative to Placerita Canyon in November 1920. And on this trip, the Lopez ladies related the version of the gold discovery story as they understood it. Here we go again. In their version, Francisco Lopez was greatly trusted by the Padres of the San Fernando Mission, and he was in charge of their cattle and stock on the Rancho San Francisco. So in 1842, Lopez rides out to Placerita Canyon with another herdsman, seeking some stray animals, unspecified animals in this case. The men and the horses get tired and decided to take a siesta under the shade of an oak tree. And after resting, Lopez noticed some wild onions growing nearby and plucked some of those out of the ground to bring home to his aunt. He noticed some shiny pebbles attached to the roots of the onions. Lopez fills a handkerchief with the stones, takes the onions back home, and there he and his father, Juan Bautista Lopez, take the pebbles into the Los Angeles Pueblo, and they're discovered that these were actually nuggets of gold. And the news of the gold discovery sets off a rush of men to Placerita Canyon to search for more gold. Belderain then took Pradham to a place in Placerita Canyon where she pointed to a spot and stated, "This is the place of the discovery. This is the exact location." So Pradham thus concluded, and I quote, "Let Mr. Marshall yield up the laurel of fame as the first pioneer discoverer of gold in California to the brow of Don Francisco Lopez, to whom it justly belongs." Another point for us. In his 1927 book, San Fernando Rey, The Mission of the Valley, Reverend Zephyrin Engelhardt, the Catholic Church official mission historian, told the Catalina Lopez version of the gold discovery story. He cited mission records indicating that another friar, Reverend Eugene Sugranes, had heard the story from Catalina Lopez. Now let's look at where we think the Oak of the Golden Dream story came from. The very first mention of a golden dream and golden oak came from historians Arthur B. Perkins and Adolfo G. Rivera in 1930. Their account was based on the testimony of Francisca Lopez de Belderain. Perkins was born in 1891. He came to Newhall in 1919 to manage the Newhall Water Company. He also served as Justice of the Peace in the 1920s and organized Newhall's first July 4th parade. When he retired, Perkins became the Valley's first local historian. He was responsible for gathering most of the historical documents and photos that we have available to us today in the Historical Society. Adolfo Rivera, he was chief of the county's Corps of Interpreters and active member of Ramona Parlor number 109, Native Sons of the Golden West. Belderain approached him 6 years previously with her desire to see a monument erected at the site of the Lopez gold discovery. Rivera is considered the chief architect of the original dedication of the Oak of the Golden Dream on March 9th, 1930 in Placerita Canyon, which was the 88th anniversary of the gold discovery. He was the one who determined which tree would be designated Oak of the Golden Dream. Prior to the ceremony, Perkins and Rivera had Belderain sign an affidavit attesting to the authenticity of her version of the story. In the affidavit, she testified that Catalina Lopez had been shown the exact site of the discovery in 1843 and subsequently showed Belderain and other family members the exact spot at the family reunion in 1914. The exact location was described as the tree under which Francisco Lopez slept during the afternoon of March 9, 1842, located on the property of Mr. Frank E. Walker in Placerita Canyon. Belderain was the one who actually successfully tracked down Frank Walker and convinced him to donate some of his land for a monument and a small park around it. The next month, Perkins and Rivera had Frank Walker sign this affidavit as to the exact site of the gold discovery which he had been shown by Belderain. On March 9, 1930, Rivera organized a ceremony dedicating the Oak of the Golden Dream at the site of the Lopez gold discovery. Valley historian Leon Warden, is Leon here yet? No, I guess not. Okay, so he can't blame me for this one then. Wrote, "It was Adolfo who determined which tree would be associated with the legend of Lopez's Golden Dream on the word of relatives of a Lopez descendant who pointed it out to them 70 years after the fact." He said it, I didn't. The ceremony was hosted by the La Mesa Club and Ramona Parlor number 109 of the Native Sons of the Golden West, both of which were represented by Rivera, and also by the Kiwanis Club and Chamber of Commerce of Newhall Saugus, both of which were represented by Arthur Perkins. Rivera was master of ceremonies. There were speeches by Belderain, State Senator Reginaldo F. Del Valle, the grandson of Antonio Del Valle, Perkins, and Frank Walker. The ceremony program stated that after the speeches, you will be shown the 500-year-old oak tree under whose shade Francisco Lopez enjoyed his midday siesta on the day of the discovery. Now this is an interesting speech which I'm going to read to you and which I'm probably not going to do with the drama that this guy probably did, but it's sort of laid down the gauntlet to historians in the future as to who actually had the first documented gold discovery in California. So it's interesting. And Rivera stated, quote, "This date marks the 88th anniversary of the discovery of gold on this very spot in 1842, that the world may know, that the northern historians may learn, that our state authorities may take notice and insert these facts in our school textbooks. We are placing a temporary tablet over a mound of boulders placed here 3/4 of a century or more ago, but lately unearthed by Mr. Frank Walker, the owner of these premises. La Mesa Club, with a membership of native and adopted sons of California, will place a tablet on yonder oak, 'neath whose shade the discoverer slept his siesta on that eventful day.'" But wait, it gets better. I love this. All right, here we go. "We of this Southland do now inform the historians of the North and announce to the world that we proclaim our right to be recognized in the history-making epochs of our state, that this discovery must be presented in the textbooks in our schools, and we advise legitimate writers on California history to take heed, or they will be branded as falsifiers and concealers of the truth." Score another one for us. Perkins in his speech said, "We wish to recall March 9th, 1842, when Francisco Lopez arose from under the tree of the golden dreams and made that epical discovery of gold." Now, Rivera had also suggested the words Encino del Ensueños Dorados, or Oak of the Golden Dream, for the plaque to be placed on the oak tree. And presumably this is where the concept of the Oak of the Golden Dream originated. There were 2 plaques dedicated that day. This one was placed on the Oak of the Golden Dream and read, "Encino de los Ensueños Dorados de Francisco Lopez, Oak of the Golden Dreams, placed by La Mesa Club, March 9th, 1930. The second plaque was affixed to a pile of boulders next to the tree that had apparently been dug up by Frank Walker. And it read, "Francisco Lopez here discovered the first gold in California, March 9th, 1842. This plate placed March 9th, 1930 by the Ramona Parlor number 109 Native Sons of the Golden West, La Mesa Club, Kiwanis Club of Newhall, Saugus." Both plaques were stolen by 1957. Things never change, do they? And only the Boulder plaque was thought to have been later recovered. Shortly after the dedication ceremony in July 1930, Belderain published her version of the gold discovery story and presented it to the State Library of California. Her story was called "The True History of the First Discovery of Gold in California in 1842. Here's our last version of the Lopez story. So in this version, Francisco Lopez was making one of his periodic visits to his niece's ranch, and his niece was Jacoba Feliz, or Maria Jacoba Feliz, and made preparations for an all-day outing in the mountain dressed in hunting attire. His wife asked him to bring her some wild onions which grew in the canyons. And after inspecting his stock and taking a hard stroll up and down the mountains, he grew fatigued and selected a tree under which to rest and have lunch. After a lengthy siesta, Lopez awoke and remembered his wife's request. He dug up some wild onions nearby and noticed gold clinging to the roots. He excitedly shouted out, "Gold, I have found it at last, gold, gold." He had a boy servant with him who was awoken by the shouting and thought his master had gone mad. He brings the gold back to the rancho and rejoiced with his wife, niece, and family. The next day, the whole family rides over to the San Fernando Mission to give the great news to Francisco's brother Pedro. Remember, Pedro was the mayordomo of the mission at the time. They had a great celebration that evening. The next morning, Francisco and Pedro ride to Los Angeles to notify the authorities there. The townspeople were so greatly excited, they dispatched an emissary to Mexico City with the news. And when Governor Juan Alvarado was informed of the gold discovery, he bestowed an official title on Francisco Lopez in recognition of the merits of his find. This is a little different from our story where Lopez sends a letter to Alvarado requesting permission to mine. Here we are in what was Placerita State Park, which was dedicated in 1959. The dedication ceremony included a reenactment of Francisco Lopez's famous discovery of gold at the Oak of the Golden Dream, seen in the photo on the left. The man in the suit, where is he? This guy, was Paul Palmer. He was a Sand Canyon resident and Los Angeles area attorney who was involved in the deal that brought Placerita Parkland into public ownership. Photo on the right shows Palmer with LA County Sheriff Eugene Biscalis. Turns out that Biscalis was a descendant of Spanish pioneer Jose Maria Claudio Lopez, who was this guy right here. So in conclusion, was the story of the Oak of the Golden Dream fact or legend? What can we say for certain? We can say for certain that Francisco Lopez made the first documented gold discovery in California history in the Santa Clarita Valley, most likely in Placerita Canyon. What remains somewhat in question based on the accounts presented today in this talk are the exact location of the gold discovery, the exact date, and the exact circumstances under which Lopez discovered the gold. We may never know for sure what really happened. The absolute truth may have died with Francisco Lopez. I'd like to thank Tricia Lemon Putnam, Lauren Parker, and Stan Walker for finding some of the articles that we went through today. And I'll be happy to entertain any questions. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Placerita Canyon. What's the earliest name for Placerita Canyon? Seems kind of convenient that Placer is found gold in a river, and you actually have Placer. Did it exist before you found gold?
Yeah, I think that came afterwards in relation to his gold discovery. I'm not sure what it was called before, but that was a confusion with San Feliciana Canyon. I think there were some sources that thought it was named that before, but I don't know for sure about that. I think the two canyons were mixed up with each other. Yeah, but that probably came afterwards in relation to the gold discovery. Yeah. Yes?
Would it have been unlikely that anyone coming from Monterey, New Mexico, to pass through this canyon? I think the one discovery was claimed to be travelers.
Yeah.
But were there probably established routes? Didn't probably include areas through here, I wouldn't imagine.
Well, this was somewhat of an established route. Actually, when the Portola expedition came through in 1769, they actually did come through this valley, and they were actually considering making the main mission here rather than San Fernando. They eventually decided on San Fernando. So this was a well-known area to the early settlers here. So very possible they could have come through. Yeah.
Was there a Reyes adobe farther up on the up the 5 there?
Not up the
there's the Reyes adobe over here in Agora.
Yeah.
They have mission, adobe days.
Right.
But I was told by one of the docents there that there's another one here, and of course there were other ones in Santa Monica Canyon. But I think that might have been because of the Portola, because they were basically descendants of Portola, the Rios and the Reyes.
Right. Well, Portola expedition.
The actual people that were on the expedition.
Portolas went through here. They went over what we think is like Ellesmere Canyon now, and then I think they turned along the Santa Clara River and went down that way. So I don't know if anything farther north would have anything to do with Portola. But there was, there was another priest, I forget his name, but there's a plaque up by Lebec that was coming up through that way into the San Joaquin Valley and was exploring there. So it's possible. I haven't heard that about the Reyes.
They spell it F-A-G-E-S.
That's the guy, Pedro. Yeah, Fages. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Was the gold rush that happened here more of a local thing, or did it bring in?
Good question. It was a local thing. Now, why was it a local thing? We don't know for sure, But remember, at the time that this discovery was made, this was Mexico. It was not the United States. And so we don't think it got quite the publicity because it was Mexico as the Marshall discovery when it was more, American. It just didn't get that kind of publicity. And so it did remain a local event. It was mostly mined by people from Sonora, Mexico, and never got big like the Marshall discovery. Yeah. And then the gold kind of petered out after several years, and then there was a much bigger strike up north. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes?
Where is Feliciano Canyon?
Feliciano Canyon is in, it's up by Piru and Hasley Canyon, up in that area. Uh-huh.
I think you mentioned a couple of other historians that are working on the same question. Is that going on now that there are others?
Are there other historians working on it? No, I'm the only historian working on it. As far as I know. Yes, sir.
So they find this stuff and then, I mean, what happened? Local guys prospected and they just kind of felt like they found everything?
Yeah, it wasn't really local guys. I mean, there were some local guys, but like I said, it was a lot of miners came up from Sonora, Mexico. And I didn't go through figures as to how much money they got out of the ground, but it was in the millions, or it was a significant amount. And then, yeah, it petered out eventually. But then so did the big gold rush, too. If you were a 49er going to the gold rush up north, after a year or two there, you weren't really doing very well. It was really just those first couple of years that people got a lot of gold out of it.
So it's all gone.
Yeah. Well, it's not all gone. You can still find gold up here. It's, there's going to be gold around, but it's not going to be enough to, start making a living on it at this point. Yeah. Yes, Lynn?
Answer part of that question.
Go ahead.
One of the miners that was brought up from Sonora was Jose great-great-grandfather. Was brought up by Garcia in the court, and he pulled out approximately $43,000 worth of gold.
That's a lot.
Between the two canyons. Yeah.
Yeah.
For that time period. They have big ranches to keep up too. So.
Mm. Yeah, the few guys that did it here actually did pretty well with it, but it's lucky for them, it didn't get the publicity, so they didn't have the competition that the 1849 rush did. Yes, sir?
What makes you think, and I think I understood you correctly, that Francisco Lopez, is it Francisco?
Yeah.
Lopez died in poverty. Because I think you also said he was, it appeared he was a substantial landowner.
Yeah, well, we don't know for sure. We have not been able to track down anything about his later life or death. So what makes me think that is the statement by the guy that I mentioned there, and the fact that we can't seem to, it's usually fairly easy to find, at least, if you do the Ancestry.com or those genealogy networks now, it's usually reasonably easy to find somebody's, at least their death date and where they were buried and that sort. We can't find this guy.
Was the land sold off, or did it stay in the family, or was it traded? Documentary history of...
Yeah, I don't think it stayed in the family. It was probably sold off at some point. Like even the Rancho San Francisco here went through several owners before getting to Henry Mayo Newhall. And it stayed with the Newhall family for, obviously until the present. But they did go through several owners.
Most of the original ranchos, like Francisco Marquez, who was my, ancestor way back on my mother's side, and all the land out there, it was either taken by the railroad because they got it for free, people who were the railroad people, and then that was condemned, and then the 27,000 acres originally owned, that was under Spain, that was cut down when it became Mexican land grabs. And the ranchos got smaller and smaller. Yeah. And then when the United States came in, they had no defense because they had a big drought, their cattle were done.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they just ended up not paying taxes. Like my grandmother owned blocks on Wilshire Boulevard, most of where the Coast Highway is. And she was lucky to sue for $40,000 in 19.
That's exactly correct. A lot of the original Spanish rancho owners lost that land when the Americans came in the 1840s and 50s and 60s because of drought and because of funny practices by the Americans that took the land away from them. So,
barn burning even, I've heard of.
So yeah, that's that. So then a lot of it did not stay with the Spanish or Mexicans. No. Yes.
The mining that went on around this area, was it concentrated in any particular areas? Or they pretty much keep moving and just wherever they found it?
There was you can read about some mining that was done in the 1860s up in Soledad Canyon, and there was actually a town called Soledad City, which was basically a tent encampment that moved up and down the Soledad Canyon as they found different, it was gold, silver, and copper, I think, and they just kept moving up and down the valley. They eventually lost the name Soledad up to this, there was a Soledad up in Northern California, and so they lost the name to the post office took that name away. Eventually they called the town Ravenna, which is up by Acton, and that was named after a saloon keeper there in that town. But, and then as far as other mining, I think most of it was concentrated where they found the gold here and up in San Feliciana. But there, as I said, there was mining up in San Francisco even before Lopez. So yeah, I mean, there's gold all through the San Gabriels, most likely. Yeah. I think people still go up there and try to find gold now. Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you suppose Lopez would have told Robinson about the frequency of gold strikes in this area?
I don't know that Lopez told, because Robinson was back east, but there was Abel Stearns, who apparently did talk to Lopez. And what he told him, all we know is what I told you on the screen there. I don't know what else he would have told him. Yeah.
And he just wanted confirmation this is real gold.
Right, right. They sent it to the mint to make sure it was real and to how much it was worth and that sort of thing.
So they could come back and say, no, this is real.
Right, right. Yes.
Yeah, this is gold that belonged to the California Gold Rush.
Cool. Is that from up north?
Huh?
That's from up north?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. I'll have to take a look at it. Yeah. Yes.
Was there any mining in the Tujunga Wash?
I don't know for sure. I would not surprise me.
I read something.
Yeah, as I say, even today people are going up, I don't know how legal it is, but they go up into the San Gabriels and do some, gold panning.
I think that was the
Yeah.
BLM
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Oh, wow. Yeah. Nice one. Yeah, they did stuff like this. Some of the first gold pieces that you find, if you're a coin collector from the 1840s or whatever, came from the California Gold Rush, and possibly some of the gold from down here might have ended up in things like this. Yeah. Any other questions?
I just want to make a comment.
Yes.
There was a question about another Reyes Adobe out in this area.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Or Hills or tied to that dam, the Adobe that's there. If you go to the Mission Archives and you read the history tied to that, you'll find out that the Reyes family owned Rancho San Francisco. And that when the priest and the soldiers came to establish the mission, there's documentation that says that basically, on behalf of the King of Spain, that rancho was taken and they were given space to live where the actual Reyes Adobe is today. So if you want to go do that research, you can find that information.
So you heard that the Reyes family had owned the Rancho San Francisco? Cool. That one I'd not heard.
They were forced out of their property and moved to Oxford, to the place where they are today. So that research, that information is in there.
Can you get me that source?
There's a person out there who knows.
Yeah, that's because that's an interesting one.
Right at the Reyes Adobe. That's who gave me the story and gave me the different locations. And Ernest Marquez, who's still alive, in his 90s, he probably, he's written more history books than anybody else in the area that have been published. He would probably know, because the Marquez and Reyes were actually interbred, and so were the Carrillos. They're all like mixed up in genealogy if you trace them.
Yeah, if the Reyes family owned Rancho San Francisco, that would be a new one to us, which I would want to know about.
Well, it was some kind of a huge,
Yeah.
huge amount of land that they were originally given.
Yeah.
Both Francisco
What
Park
he's
there.
saying is, it was before the mission was established.
I'm talking before the mission.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, from basically,
So it wasn't even.
their rights came from the Portola.
Oh. Yeah, it was probably not a rancho land grant then, it was just they had the land, yeah. Okay, that would make sense, yeah. All right, anything else? Thank you so much for coming. That's very nice, thank you.